Okay, so in class today, the plan is to quickly go through several layout managers that are mentioned in the book. And in the book, they actually only mention 3, which is pretty lame because there's some better layout managers than what they show in the book. But it's good to get practice with those. And I wanted you to have practice with using them in Eclipse Designer. And just so a quick presentation, you're kind of discussing these layout managers, and you can be firing up Eclipse while getting ready for this. In the book, they mention these 3. They mention the grid layout, whereas you lay out objects on your or add them to your panel, they get put in a series of rows and columns, and you can add them. Tell the grid layout how many rows you want. If you adjust how many rows you want, it will automatically readjust all the elements that have been added to it. So that's handy when you have like a grid of items. You're playing a tic-tac-toe game and you want 3 by 3, and you just want to add to that panel 3 images or 9 images or 9 boxes. You can tell it has grid layout and just keep adding in a loop 9 little boxes. And as they click on them, they become X's or O's depending on whose turn it is. The next one they mention in the book is the flow layout, where you add things to it, and it sort of just fits it in the window as they go. So left to right, and if it can't fit in a row, it'll add more past that. So more of a random location. I think it does center the elements within each row. So it kind of handles the managing of the layout for you. And then the third one that they mentioned in the book is the border layout, where it has a north, south, east, west, and center location for the different items. Now I'm going to look at those by building a new frame in Eclipse. I'm going to go over to Eclipse and start a new project. So just like, unless you already have one going here, I'm going to close a bunch of these extra windows as I was practicing with this. Going to start from scratch. So I'm just going to do File, New Project, starting from scratch. Here we go. New Java project. I'm going to give it a name. Let's call it Layout Manager Practice. And when I'm done with this, I'm also going to be sending it to my GitHub repository using the menu. And you can do this too with your GitHub account. You can create a project and then create a repository for it. But we'll do that after we play with some layout managers. So new layout manager practice project. Thinks a little bit and then brings up my project. And first thing I'm going to do is add a JFrame to this project. So here we go. Since I have added Window Builder to my Eclipse installation, it has this menu of swing items available to me, and I'm going to add a JFrame. If you don't have that, let me quickly show you how to do that. You go under Help, Install New Software. Select your site would be the regular releases site in the selection down below that. And you wait for this to populate, and you'll see a general section populate. Go down in there and select all swing and window builder items. So underneath general purpose tools, I just selected the release, the download releases. Mine has oxygen. Yours probably has neon. If you have neon, then you go down there in the general settings, and you'll see I already should have them already selected down in the S's. Oh, I have it set to only show items that haven't yet been installed. I'll uncheck that, and it'll show you that if it isn't installed, it'll show you Swing and Window Builder. And so again, down in the general purpose tools, it's a little faster today than the last time we did this, and we'll see down in the S's here. Oh, it should. I'm surprised. I have Swing Designer documentation. All the swing you can select I even selected SWT, although that's not necessary. And then in the Windows Builder, just check all of those, and it will add it. And then it'll reset Eclipse. And once it comes back, you'll have the GUI building features in your menu. Yeah, all the swing and all the window builder. Just select those under the general purpose, and then say install. It'll bring up a little dialog saying, do you agree to the license? Then it will add them to your. It'll reset Eclipse and then add them to your perspective. Okay, so I have. I'm creating a new JFrame. I remember now. Back to this. My example layout managers. What's that? General, under General. General Utilities. And if it's already there, if you see this already, then you don't have to worry about installing. If you have this available in your menu as swing JFrame available, then you're fine. Well, you can do new class or this menu right here next to it. If you do new other, it will show as being available underneath a swing designer section under window builder. So new other will show window builder. Yes. Help add other software, install new software. That takes you there to then the selection of those items. Yep. So I go to my project. I can do new other or this little menu item here, new swing JFrame. And I'm going to call this JFrame my main. I like to call it main JFrame. And it gets created and it pops me up into either the source or the design of it. Here's the source. If I don't see the design tab down at the bottom, I can close that. And I can always make sure that I can right click, open with Window Builder Editor. What that does, it tries to parse it with things that are in it. And then the thing I love here, I can click on the Design tab. And I can adjust my behavior of this. You can give it a name. I called mine main JFrame. Double click on the top tab and then just give me the one view in the design view of that JFrame. Right click, open with. Do you see the open with Window Builder Editor on the source code? You right click, open with, then the little design tab should be there. Now for this first JFrame, what I want to do is just show you how layout managers are not only useful for the whole frame itself, but you can apply a layout to specific things within your JFrame. I'm going to select my main panel and make it a little larger. And now I can put some panels here in my frame. And I have some containers. I'm going to go ahead and put a J panel up here. I'll put a couple of them. Oh, and I see, as I come over here, I see that I have the default layout that Eclipse is using. Can you tell what default layout that is? That's the box layout. That's the default layout. And I'm happy to go with that one. For now, I'm going to go ahead and click that, put that panel there. Well, I don't make it a size. When I come over here, it will automatically fill it. The whole JFrame? Oh, you don't have, it does, the size really doesn't matter. It looks like mine's about 500 by 500. And I started a container J panel, and I can't tell what layout manager I have until I decide to put something in it. And this designer nicely shows me that if I put something here, wherever I hover over, it's giving me a visual indicator of where that's going to go into the default box layout. And I click here, and it will create a container, I was expecting it to fill the size of that box. That's a little strange. Let's see if it lets me size that. No, it's not letting me size that. Let's run this and just see if this appears this way. I'm just going to do a quick run and see what that looks like when it actually runs. I guess I can't tell because it had no border or color. If I want to change my layout of my frame, all I have to do is come over here. I can select my content pane over here in the components part. I can select that, and down here in the properties, I can choose his layout down here, and I'm going to change it to absolute layout. Sometimes that's very handy. I can change that to absolute layout, and you don't see the effect of it until you come over here and now select items within it. Now it lets me adjust items, and they're not at a fixed location within a box. I can adjust it any location I want when I change my layout manager. Well, I came over here in the components section. I selected the content pane of that JFrame, and then down in the properties, I can change its layout manager. Yeah. Sure. And I'll show you, there's another way to change your layout manager. You can actually choose a layout here, and if you come and hover over it, it'll show the green box all the way around. That's another way of applying the layout manager to that in the designer. Sure, yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to try. So absolute layout is pretty nice layout. I can come over here and I can have a panel in here, and I can move this around, and it doesn't, no, see, it's not limiting me where I put this panel. That's the nice thing about absolute layout. I can adjust it. It places it exactly where I'm drawing it. I have complete control over where it goes. I just grabbed a panel and put it in here. And go ahead and grab a button, lay a button somewhere in there. Just select and click. And any kind of button. I just did a regular button. And I'm going to put another one in the lower right corner. And we'll see what's important about this. And see how it gives you little snap guides. It tries to align things for you when you come to alignment with other items. Things just look better when they're aligned with other things in a user interface. And it gives you some padding from the border, suggested places, but it doesn't force you to put it there. It just makes a suggestion. Yeah. Now, one thing I also want to show you, remember this one here was a panel. I can choose a layout by coming over here, and let's just try that box layout. I can choose any layout manager, and if it's a panel or other things that layout managers work with, I can just come over and hover over here and see how the green surrounds that. What this means is I'm actually applying the box layout manager to this little panel inside of here. So panels can have layout manager to apply to them. And so that can, let's go then put a button inside of there. If I come over here, he'll show me that he'll take a button and he'll put them in the box layout of that panel. So I can have a layout manager applied to this panel and a separate kind of layout manager applied to the actual frames content manager. So we have panels within the frames panel. So panels are very special. They can have different layout managers applied to them. Now let's just run this to see how it behaves before playing with other layout managers with other JFrames, which I want to do. I'm going to run this, wait for it to compile and display, and then we'll see how it behaves. Okay, here's the result of this. Generally, it looks quite a bit like how I drew it. I can't tell the border of this panel. I suppose I could apply a background color to that panel just so I could tell where it is over here. And the buttons behave. They display a little shadow when I click. But here's the important thing. If I adjust this layout or the size of this frame, look what happens to the buttons. Because it's an absolute layout, they stick in an absolute position. That's why they call it absolute layout. Now this is okay if I want my program to have a fixed size. But sometimes you want your program to be able to adjust to a screen size. Or even something even more critical these days. Here's a question I'm going to toss out there. This whole book talks about user interfaces. What major market of user interfaces is not being covered in this book in chapter 12? Yeah, mobile is the big thing now. These don't do anything with mobile. And what's the big thing with mobile that we need to adjust for? Yeah. In the mobile device, you know, have you gone to web pages and they adjust? You better adjust for orientation. That's something that's like a second step after getting the basic things going here. And to do that, you got to get the thing beyond Eclipse. It's the Android Developers Kit, which basically is Eclipse with all that kind of stuff built into it. So by giving you experience with Eclipse, you can, without a lot of difficulty, it does take a little learning to learn the Android Developers Kit. It's Eclipse with settings, layout managers that will automatically adjust for orientation. It's really cool stuff, but it takes more work to get that to happen. So we're just playing with this part, but it's not a huge step to go into the Developers Kit. But back to this now. I've applied a layout manager. Things are stuck in absolute position. But we want to allow the user to adjust their JFrame. So in order to see how that works, I need to create another JFrame with a different layout manager applied so I can see it behave as I resize it. Okay? So all I'm doing is creating a JFrame, applying a layout manager. I should give this guy a title. He's absolute, so I'm going to call him main, and he's absolute layout. So I'm adding a title, main absolute. So when my program runs, I can tell what layout style or what layout manager is applied to that one. Okay, so now I want to make a new JFrame and see how another layout manager behaves. Because this is the way I learn how to work with these different layout managers. Okay, and I'm going to show you the next favorite one of mine. After I'm going to create a new JFrame over here, swing JFrame. I'm going to call him JF underscore spring. I'm going to use the spring layout. That's a really nice layout, and it's the one that NetBeans uses, I think, by default. And NetBeans is pretty good alternative IDE. So I'm calling it JF Spring. I made a new JFrame, a new swing JFrame. Now it wants to put a main in there. I don't care about that main. I'll leave it in there for now because I'm not going to actually be using it. A new swing JFrame. And I'm going to go to the design page for him, and remember how to apply a layout to him. I'm going to go click on, in the design view, spring layout, and then just hover over it and click plus. The spring layout now has been applied to that. Now let's see how the spring layout behaves. Oh, and let's not forget, I'm going to apply a title to him. I'm going to call him spring layout. So when it runs, I know as I'm creating multiple frames which one is the spring layout. Now let's go ahead and lay out a few graphical elements in there. Pick whatever ones you want. Buttons are easy. I'm going to put a button in the upper left corner and see how it snaps it to the border. And I'm going to create another button. Yeah, just a regular button. And I'm going to apply another one. This time I'm going to put this other button in the lower right. And I'll give a little padding in from the border. And you'll see little lines appear. See what they have to do with this. And pick something else. I'll go ahead and pick a checkbox. Bring that over here. And as you come and lay it out, it'll show little attachments once you lay it in a particular position. As I click and it falls into position, the software decides what to do with that. Has to think a little bit. And you'll see little connectors showing up. Those are my springs. And I'll come in and put a radio button in. And I'll lay it over here next to this guy. And I think I might have a text area. I'm going to go ahead and put a text area in here. Where's my text area? There. I'll put a text area. I'm going to put that up here. I just applied a spring layout just by selecting it and then hovering over it and clicking. Click the text area, and it takes a while to think. I'll call this a text area. Yeah, any particular box. I'm going to select that text area. I'm going to adjust him a little bit here. Let's adjust over a bit. There, let's see. And this, yeah, I did a checkbox and a text area. And I adjust the size of my text area. This is the one that can get kind of confusing. Oh, and it does crazy things as you adjust things. So this one's a little harder to get used to figure out how to make it work just right. It acts a little weird sometimes. So this spring layout can be handy, but sometimes it can be very confusing of what in the world. I just adjusted that and it moved all crazy things all over the place. Okay, I'm going to adjust it like that. And let's just see how this behaves now when I run the program. So what I did, I applied the spring layout to my frame and then throw in some graphical items. And you'll see these little arms appear between everything. Let's see what happens when I actually run this now. See how this, oh, I have created a JFrame, but I have to put in my main method to actually fire this one up, because right now it's only going to create the first one. Okay. Oh, I guess it did. I was expecting it to not appear. So here's a spring layout JFrame. Let's see how this guy behaves. Let's go adjust his. Look at that. It pulls that button to the lower right. The text area grows as I adjust my window. And sometimes you want this kind of behavior. You want your game area to expand if they adjust the window. But I wish it would have adjusted the height right. I didn't quite get it connected right, so it would adjust its height. But it actually is adjusting the text area width. So this is how the spring layout works. The spring layout can be pretty handy, but it takes a little getting used to figure out how to convince the designer to put things and get them to behave where you want. Let's see if I can get this text area to stretch as I increase the height. Let's see if I grab the height of this and stop there. Let's see if it will expand the height as I adjust when it runs. Okay, there's the layout. Looks a lot like that. I just select it and see how this one now is expanding because it has a spring attached up here. If I want to adjust the text area size, just select it and then grab the little size handle just on the edge. And with the spring layout, it may behave unexpectedly. It'll suddenly jump all the way connected to something you don't expect it to. So spring layouts, see how that text area grew as I adjusted my window, like that were my game area. And let's see if I adjust this guy. Let's see how that affects my text area. I'm going to take him, move him over. But so you can see that the spring layout is sort of guessing how you want things connected together. And now if I run it, let's see how it behaves now. With this one, you can't really tell exactly if it's doing what you expect until you take it. Oh, look at that. Now my checkbox is no longer attached to that button. It's only attached to the wall. So that's what I have to figure out as I work with the spring layout manager. Let's adjust that one till trying to get him to convince it to be attached to that button instead. Well, it did it automatically before. Let me adjust this guy. And I think the little springs kind of give you a hint at what is attached to what. And so this is where the spring layout manager gets kind of confusing. Let's try it this way. It looks like now what this is telling me, from what I can understand, this little line here means I'm going to stay this fixed distance away from the top of this panel. This edge will stay a fixed distance away from this panel. So let's move that over a little bit. Oh, and now the line is moved to be the same distance away from that wall. Let's see if I can adjust this. Oops. Nope. All right, let me see if I can give you a hand. And this is where knowing both how the code works by having done it ourselves. So those are the two layout managers. Well, those two. Now, to see them both behave now, or to see another one, let's see, what was the other one? Basically, the spring and the absolute are probably the other ones that are pretty useful to you. Let's take a look at the grid bag. This is kind of an interesting one. And when you I came across a grid bag when I was looking for advice and learning about layout managers. And this one page was saying this guy loved the grid bag the best. So I tried that once. So let's just see how we would do that. Grid bag, right there, grid bag. And they give you a little help about it as you hover over it. Well, let's explore it ourselves by then applying it to, let's make another JFrame, swing JFrame, and I'll call it JF grid. And I'll edit him in design view. Let's give him a title, grid layout. All right, now let's see how it behaves. Oh, I have to apply the grid layout, grid bag layout. Actually, I should have given him a name, grid bag, not grid. Let me fix that name. Grid bag layout, not grid layout. That's grid bag. Okay, he has grid bag layout applied, and I can just verify that selecting him, hovering over his content pane, because every JFrame has a content panel, content pane. And now let's put something in it. A J button. Oh, look at that. There's a grid imposed over that window. Now let's just put something here in the upper left. Takes a while to think about it. It adjusts the grid for that button. All right, now let's come put a new button over there. Let's put him in the lower right. And now I see he's somehow adjusted that column to fit that other button. Let's put something here in the lower right little piece of the grid. He thinks about it. And adjust that column. Now let's put a text area. Let's see. We'll see how he behaves here. Let's put a text area up here. Oh, and there's even little tiny squares in between the larger squares. And once he's got a text area there ready, not sure why the title appeared way up there. That's strange behavior. Might have been clicking too fast. That's interesting. Yeah. No, I don't know where he went. Sometimes if you go too fast, you get it confused. Let's try another JText area. And make sure I select the right one. There's that other one shows up now. Little strange behavior. It didn't work this way the first time I did it, putting these little boxes in between. Let's just see what happens when I run this. Let's see if it shows up automatically. I'm running it. I'm hoping both windows will show up. Otherwise, I'll have to. There's my grid bag layout. Oh, look, and now the text area showed up in the middle there. Now let's adjust my window. This is the whole point of this. So there's the grid bag layout. Similar to Springs, but a little bit more of a structured location. And again, somewhat confusing. It's like the parser or the GUI designer doesn't quite know how to display it. When I run it, that's what I was expecting to see. See how it adjusts those two text areas to fit? And they adjust size as I go. And I don't see them adjust as I move because I've set my windows to not show contents while dragging. Yep. Yep. It doesn't follow? Okay. So the locations on the edge are like attached to that edge and will move with it. And that's something you learn just by playing with the Layout Manager. You can try reading through the documentation. This is strange here that this looks completely different than when I run. So that's one problem. I would call this a bug, that it's not showing how it shows when I run. So I'm a little disappointed with GridBag in this case. Okay? And I thought I did it right. I just selected a box. But now this is great practice at just you learning to see how these layouts work. Remember though, I can always come over to my content frame in my pane or in my frame. I can go down to the properties here and I can choose my layout there as well. So I can come to the properties of the content pane. I don't have to come over here, click, and drag it onto my pane. But that is how the designer lets you choose your layout. But you know, with the power you've had by doing it yourself, let's take a look at the source code generated when I did this all in Designer. Because remember what Designer is doing, it's basically trying to write the code for you. So we can look at the code now, and because we've done this ourselves before, here's where I make my JFrame, and this is an object that extends JFrame like we did by hand before. And here is the creation of all those items. And you can see how it's making the frame, and where does it set its layout? There it creates a separate GridBag layout object, and then it does a set layout applying that layout object to it. I often will, after it's created this code, I will often come in here and add comments to it to help me understand what the designer did for me. But remember, if I adjust my designer, it may rewrite my code and may erase some things. So be careful when you modify the code. Usually it leaves it alone, but if you redesign major things, like I put a different layout manager in there. Let's just say I'm going to apply absolute layout instead. I come over here, apply absolute layout. I don't know what happened to my text areas. Let's take a look at the source code and see if they're even in there anymore. Well, I do see that they're in there. See how it, even though my title is GridBag Layout, see how it replaced all those GridBag Layout comments? So the designer does a lot of code writing for you. If I come back here and do an undo, I think it will put it back into GridBag Layout. My two text areas don't even show anything around, but let's take a look at the source code. I think they're still in there. There's my grid layout back. And my text areas are in there, but for some reason in the designer I'm not seeing them. So oh yeah, good idea. Yeah, come over here. There it shows me where it is, but in a strange location. I wasn't expecting to see it in this tiny border in between.
You see those options in the above your box? Those little.
Oh yeah, yeah.
These are actually gives you more options when you expand it.
Right.
If you do the center, I'll expand it in the center.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't even played with these options because I don't use the GridBag that often. But see how the designer is helping you out quite a bit. And so if you want to be good at this, and if you find you're often using GridBag, you'll learn to use these other items that I don't even know how to use yet. And it looks like you can adjust your columns. It looks like I can adjust my width of my columns as I go, and I can select them over here. So a lot of things available here for you. Now I wanted to do one thing before we leave. I wanted to get some practice at using GitHub. So I have an account at GitHub. I've just created this new project. Now I'm going to try to send it to my GitHub account. Let's see if we can make this work. I'm going to make sure everything is saved. I'm going to run it once just to make sure I don't have code errors. Yep, it runs. So I can claim in my GitHub that, okay, I at least ran it once. Now let's try to send this to GitHub like I want to share it with the world. With a free account, everything you put on GitHub is shared with the world. Everything is public unless you have a paid account. So I have my project, my little layout practice or example layout managers. No, layout manager practice. Here's my project. I want to send this project to GitHub. So I'm going to right click on my project, come all the way down here to team and share project. I want to create a repository for my project, and I'm going to give it a name. By default, it's going to go into my users Git folder. I'm going to call this the same as my project name, although it's not forcing me to. I'm going to call it Layout Manager Practice. So there's the project repository, and notice it's going to be storing it in a local place on my disk. This should probably be in your Y drive, I think, for your student, if you're on your system. So I choose the directory for my new repository. This is a local repository. And then I click Finish. So this is creating a local repository. Yep, so I right-clicked on my project, Team, Share Project, and then Share Project, and then we'll ask you to create the repository. Now that the repository has been created locally, now I can send it to GitHub.
It says fail to utilize Git provider. Encountered while using resources.
I don't remember having to add any Git modules. It worked? Okay. Now the part, we want to actually now send it to my Git repository. So I want to do a commit to Git now. And this is where I'm going to need my GitHub account. So I'm going to click commit. Any changes I have will show up in a Git staging window down below, and I can expand that to show my Git staging window. Okay, let's see if it can help you with that. We're kind of been spending some time in graphics. Want to at least finish layout managers and then get to source code control. So on Wednesday, we'll give you more team time if you need it, and we'll be spending, we'll be seeing if we get this GitHub thing figured out. All right, have a great day. I realized after class that I had started things in the wrong order. Before you can do a GitHub commit, there has to be a GitHub repository created. So here we go. We go log into your account in GitHub. Create a new repository. Now I have multiple repositories, so I have actually created a sub-repository of the CS315 Spring 2018 organization. So you can even create multiple organizations. Here I'm going to be creating a GitHub repository in there. But If you're just doing a regular account, you can just create a new repository right at the top level by clicking New when you're in the repository menu. And I'm going to give this a name. I'll call it Layout Manager. How about Layout Managers? This repository can have a completely different name than your project, but you might get mixed up if you don't use the same name. So I go back, Layout Manager Practice. That's right, Layout Manager Practice. A description is good. Practicing using layout managers. It has to be public unless you have a paid account. And it's good to have a README. You can always come back to that and edit it. And go ahead, I'll add the, let's see, I can add the standard GNU revision 2. And I get more, yeah, looks like there's a get more Java. Okay, we'll do a get more Java. All right, create the repository. The only thing I care about once I create this repository is where is it. And if I click clone or download, it'll show me the path. I think this is probably the path, but let's see here. It looks like, yeah, it looks like that's the same path. But in case you're not sure, this is, we'll give you the exact path. I'm going to copy it, Control C, or copy clipboard. Now I'm ready to go back, and when I do the commit and push, I can commit in my project, but I have to have staged changes. So I'm going to make a change to a piece of code. There we go. I have a piece of code changed in that project now. It'll automatically see that change, drag that down to the stage changes, commit message, modified, code, commit and push. I got to put the right URL in there, github.com. Here's the path to my repository created locally. Now let's see what happens. I have the right password and login. It should automatically get put into there. Uh-oh. Let's go back. I think I can force overwrite. That's what I've seen before, if I see that message. And it looks like it made it. I can confirm that by going to the GitHub page, and I should be able to refresh that. And nothing's there. Oh, it did show up in the branch. Looks like there it is. All my code showed up. So I made one change to the code. Once I had the git clone or the GitHub path that was found by going here, then when I do a commit of any change, it makes sure that the entire project is up there in the branch, the default branch. Now you can make multiple branches. We're not going to worry about that right now. We just want to get it up to GitHub. So there you go. Uploading it into GitHub. Oh, and if you want to share it with someone, remember that clone or download link will also be the link you share for the sharing of your project. And see, from GitHub, if you didn't want to bring it into Eclipse, you can always download it as a zip file and unpack it.